Publishers have a giant amount of power, and many tend to use this power in order to destroy or alter games in a negative way. But that isn't always the case, and I think I found one of the best publishers out there. Hello and welcome, fellow virgins. It is iSuperVirgin here, and today I'd like to talk about, well, possibly the best publisher out there. The way a publisher and a development team make a deal is actually very simple. A publisher will give funding and a set date when a game should release. During this time, they will also be able to advertise this and make sure that the game sells well when it eventually does release, so that there is a bit of a hype around it, and then when the game releases, it sells well. In turn, the development team will then, of course, make the game that they want to make. Most of the times it's a development team walking up to a publishing team and offering them like, hey, this is what we want to do. Or sometimes a publishing team has a good idea as well. There's a lot of different nuances when it comes to how these deals are made, but for the most part, that is how they are made. This is a pretty simple deal, as I said, and it can take up to years sometimes because games take a long time to make. However, a lot of times because of this, publishers have also grown. When we look at, for instance, EA, that has grown to be giant, enormous. And so when they've grown that much, they have the ability to buy teams or companies, development teams, and they then have the power over those teams because at the end of the day, they have the money. So they get to say what happens with that money. That also happens when they have these deals, but it's a bit harder for them to really alter something when they've made a deal with a development team that they don't own, rather than when they do own them, which is what a lot of these big publishers do. They own a lot of development teams, and therefore they're able to alter the games and say, like, we want it this way, we want it that way. And that's what we see a lot with games nowadays. When we look at, for instance, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, you feel that there's a bit of love in that game by Rocksteady, the creators of the Arkham trilogy, but then it of course gets ruined by the microtransactions and the live serviceness of the games, because that's what the publisher, actually wanted. They wanted live service, they wanted more money out of it, and that is the problem that a lot of companies tend to face in the gaming sphere nowadays. Like I said, we also have EA. They've ruined so many games, they've ruined so many studios, and honestly, I hate EA personally. I could be talking about them. I could be talking about publishers for a long time. And while this video is about a certain publisher, it isn't about publishers in general. But I will make a video about that. So if you do want to see a video about that, why not subscribe to the channel? Because I make videos like this every Thursday and Saturday. But back to the video. Like I said, I think I may or may not have found the best publisher out there. And what is the name of the publisher I'm talking about here? Well, it's New Blood Interactive. Maybe someone you've heard of, maybe someone you haven't heard of yet, but let me try to explain a few of their projects, and maybe you have or haven't played some of those games. Originally founded in 2014, this is now a 10-year-old company. It was founded by 3 guys, 2 of which had already worked on Rise of the Triad, or a remake of Rise of the Triad, in 2013. So these were people that kind of already a bit of a connection, and they decided to make a publishing company together. They then originally wanted to release VR games. Sadly enough, that never really came to fruition. They never really made VR games. I don't think that's even still part of their plan. I think they've made one VR game, which was also, I think, a Rise of the Triad VR version, but they're not really mainly VR anymore. They make a lot of different other games. At that time, they actually had the company behind Super Galaxy Squadron, which needed a publisher, so they had a deal in front of them. They needed a pixel artist from that company, and so it was pretty easy to just be able to make a deal that way and get a benefit that, furthers both companies. Now, Super Galaxy Squadron has gotten a remaster, it's gotten a turbo version. Up until March of 2017, that is pretty much the only thing the company had really worked on. So it was like 3 years of working on that and just re-releasing and further working and publishing and whatnot. This was a small company, of course. Now, this is where, of course, also then they had to move on to new projects, and where the team really did start to shine and show, you know, their interesting good games or their help with these new games. Because almost a year later, they decided to release Dusk. This was in January of 2018, so it was only like 9 or 10 months until they actually did release this game. And Dusk is basically a horror-themed boomer shooter. So at the time, boomer shooters were kind of coming back in, so this was definitely a very well-received game. And because of this being so well-received, they now actually did have funding, enough money to, you know, in the long run have other projects that they could make without having too many money problems. This was a very, very good step. And honestly, this was the first full release that they didn't just, you know, make a deal with another company. They released this themselves. This was New Blood Interactive. And while when you look at the development team behind Dusk or behind any other game that I'm going to talk about today, you'll see sometimes just names, right? You won't see development teams. And that is because they don't work necessarily with development teams. They have a team and they actually do still work on games. But let me continue here. They, of course, because of this, also kind of set their name in stone and were able to publish new games like Amid Evil and Faith the Unholy Trinity. Now, Amid Evil is, in my opinion, maybe not the most known game, but Faith the Unholy Trinity was definitely, I remember that being quite a rage back in the day. A lot of people did really enjoy that game, and it got a lot of attention on YouTube and Twitch and all those other platforms. So I'm very, very sure that you've heard of that game before. And this is where more projects started to get created by New Blood. So, you know, you might think to yourself, you haven't really told us yet, you know, why is this publishing company like the best out there? Well, I have been telling you, but not that clearly. See, publishers, like I said, they tend to work on advertising. They give it funding. They say, hey, you've got so long to make this game, you got so much money, that's it. That's what you need to do. But because they do this, they have the chance to author the games. New Blood, however, actually has a pretty small team, and they just tend to also work on their own games and work together on those games. But they are also a publishing company for other smaller development teams with interesting ideas. And so far, I don't think there's one game that they've released that isn't interesting. I do understand that Super Galaxy Squadron isn't for everyone, and that is definitely a game that I personally would never see myself playing. But when I look at other games like Faith the Unholy Trinity or Dusk or any other game that they've released, which I'll be talking about just now, they're all really good games and they're really fun, and they kind of face the same kind of idea, same theme. Because since Dusk, they've actually released more bangers. Like I said, they've released Amid Evil, they've released Ultrakill, which I think a lot of people do know. That is a very, very famous game, Ultrakill. And they've released Gloomwood, which is a bit less famous, but I personally have played the early access version that is out now a lot. I've put quite a few hours into it, and honestly, it is a very good game. It is a sort of horror-esque. It gives me very big Dishonored vibes, and that's weird, but it's so quirky, and it actually does work really well. But I'm not going to talk about Gloomwood too much, because I do actually want to make a video about that, want to make a video about how good the game is and how much fun it is to play. Honestly, these games, they're being published by a publisher that wants to make good games, right? They don't want to just make money. Sometimes they throw away a bit of money just to make sure that something works really well, or they throw away time. But as I've mentioned, New Blood is a very, very small company. We have about 25 employees, and it's a flat hierarchy, which means that everyone is kind of in the same boat here. No one's really seen as upper or lower. Of course, you have executives, but those executives aren't necessarily like seen as much higher than an average developer or an average worker in the team. There is no management between, or maybe there is, but it's only very little. But there should be no management between staff and executives, which means that everyone's just working together, everyone knows each other, and everyone wants to work to the same goal. Next to this, we also of course have all these games that they're making, because like I said, Gloomwood is, I think, being made by 2 people at the moment that work within New Blood. Other people could help develop this game, and this of course means that a game takes longer to create, but you can still see the passion and a goal, and the consistency in the game stays. And that is something that you lose when you create bigger teams or you work with hundreds of people on one game. You lose this sort of interesting part of it. It becomes too generic, and I think that that is exactly what New Blood stands for, is not being generic and making special games. With like a company like this, the main selling point is passion. It truly is. It's just make a good game that might sell well, but at least we've made something that we wanted to make, and it looks cool and it plays cool and it feels good. And that is exactly what makes them so much better than all those greedy companies, all those greedy publishers that we know and hate so much. Because let's face it, how many publishers do you know that aren't absolute money hungry pricks? Not a lot. Not a lot. Most companies, most of these publishers only care about one thing, and that is making the most amount of money. And that is logical in one end because it's a company, but it's also really scummy because you lose the art that is part of a game like that. And luckily we still have this here, and this might take time. The games that are published or made by New Blood might take time to release, but I'd rather wait a couple of years extra to get a absolute banger of a game than just to get a generic schlop that Ubisoft or EA brings out each and every single year again. That isn't even fun to play for longer than maybe an hour, but hey, they've taken your $60. They don't care anymore. They don't want to do anything else anymore for you. Enough ranting, but I do have some extra news about New Blood. Not too long ago, they actually published Fallen Aces, which is in early access currently, and I have actually personally played it. It is an absolute banger of a game. It is so fun to play. It's also kind of in the boomer shooter-esque thing. It really offers you a way of just playing the game however you want to play, and that is what I think makes it such a cool little game. They also still have 4 games left unannounced, so that's probably going to come out in like the next year or 2, but also very exciting. Like I said, we also have the work on Gloomwood on the early access of this. So we have Fallen Aces and Gloomwood working further in early access. We have 4 new games that they're working on with. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that this company is going to be releasing in the next year or 2. And these people that are working on these games can develop these games with passion and make the games they want to make, and that wouldn't have been the case if it weren't for New Blood Interactive. Right now, I'd like to hear what you think. Do you feel as if this is in fact one of, if not the best publishing company that you've ever heard of, or do you know any others that you find better or on par with New Blood Interactive? Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're down there, why not subscribe to the channel for more gaming commentary just like this every Thursday and Saturday. Anyhow, I hope you have a great day, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.